Let's start reading the scientific article of Unit 5 of the International Biology A level.
Scientific article for use with Question 8. Article 1. Risk of heart failure may increase with age due to Y chromosome loss. The Y chromosome, involved in sex determination, mysteriously disappears from some men's immune cells as they get older, and that could be fatal. The Y chromosome, right, is smaller than the X chromosome, left. The immune cells of many older men lose their Y chromosomes, and this may contribute to men having a higher rate of heart disease than women. Health risks from Y chromosome loss have long been suspected, but evidence from animals and people now adds more support to the idea and may suggest a treatment for the damage caused to the heart. It was discovered several decades ago that in some people born with XY chromosomes, a proportion of the immune cells have no Y chromosome, a phenomenon that becomes more common with increasing age. For instance, 40% of 70-year-old men have no Y in at least some of the immune cells found in their blood. The reasons for this are unclear, but it could be because the Y chromosome is small and carries relatively few genes apart from those involved in sex determination and sperm production. So the stem cells that produce immune cells can survive if they happen to lose their Y when replicating their DNA. If they lose any other chromosomes, however, the cells would be more likely to die. Loss of this Y chromosome in immune cells correlates with higher rates of health problems, including heart disease, cancer, and Alzheimer's disease. But it was unclear whether Y loss causes these conditions or if faulty DNA replication is behind both Y loss and the health issues, says Lars Forsberg at Uppsala University in Sweden. To find out, Forsberg and his colleagues used the CRISPR gene editing technique to remove the Y chromosome from about 2/3 of the immune cells of male mice to mimic the phenomenon. These mice developed heart problems once they got to about 1 year of age, precipitated by their heart muscle becoming scarred. We show causality, says Forsberg. We can see that losing the Y chromosome in the blood causes disease in the heart. The researchers also looked at how Y chromosome loss affected men in a large ongoing medical study called IAL Biobank, which tracks participants' health over time. They found that the more immune cells without a Y that the men had at the time of their enrollment, the higher their risk of dying from any type of heart disease over the following 12 years. For instance, men who had lost the Y chromosome in more than 40% of their immune cells had a 31% higher risk of dying from any circulatory disease during the study period. Scarring of heart muscle can contribute to some common types of heart disease, such as heart failure, says Forsberg. Further work on the mice uncovered clues about how immune cells cause heart scarring. When the animals were dissected, immune cells lacking a Y chromosome were found to have infiltrated heart muscle, triggering the release of an inflammatory signaling molecule called transforming growth factor beta. Treating the mice with an antibody that blocks this growth factor reduced the harmful effects of a loss of the Y chromosome, although it is too soon to conclude the same approach would benefit men who are losing their Y chromosomes, says Forsberg. He is co-founder of a biotech firm called Cray Innovation that is developing a blood test to tell people if they have loss of the Y chromosome in their immune cells. This is the best evidence I have seen for a direct effect of Y chromosome loss on a physiological process, says John Perry at the University of Cambridge. In 2019, Perry and his colleagues published work suggesting that a propensity for Y chromosome loss is caused by many genetic variants that raise the likelihood of DNA errors during cell division, which could be why loss of the Y chromosome is linked with cancer. Forsberg's team next plans to investigate whether people born with XYY chromosomes experience different effects if they lose one of their Y chromosomes. Article 2. Essence of man. Y size doesn't matter. The Y chromosome, which makes men male, has been shrinking for 180 million years. But there's more to this rotting husk than anyone suspected. There's nothing very macho about the Y chromosome, even though it's what makes men male. The human Y, like its counterparts in almost all mammals, is tiny compared with its partner, the X chromosome. It's lost hundreds of genes, and if the Y continues to lose them, it could someday wink out of existence entirely. Claims of its impending demise are starting to look premature, however. Far from being a rotting husk, the modern Y tiny though it is turning out to be a highly evolved and surprisingly important part of men's wider genetic endowment, responsible for far more than just maleness. It is easy to see why some biologists thought the Y was destined for oblivion. It is all on its own. There are two copies of all other chromosomes, which are basically containers for holding genes. Each copy acts as a backup for the other. The pairs line up and swap bits when organisms reproduce. Some offspring get landed with chromosomes full of damaged genes and are eliminated by natural selection, whereas others inherit undamaged copies and survive to reproduce. Way back in the evolutionary past, there was no Y, just a regular pair of chromosomes. Sex was determined by environmental factors, such as temperature. But then a gene on a single chromosome mutated in a way that made any individual that inherited it male. At first, this proto-Y could still swap genes with its partner, the proto-X chromosome. About 180 million years ago, in the line of mammals that branched away from the platypus and echidna, a section of it containing the gene variant for maleness got flipped back to front. This section no longer lined up properly with the corresponding part of the proto-X, so damaged genes in this section could no longer be swapped for good ones. Beyond repair. Further inversions put more and more of the Y beyond repair. The X was fine because females inherit two copies that can swap parts. The Y, however, started to lose bits because men have just one copy. The human version now has just 78 genes, far less than its original 600 or so. At this rate of decay, the Y ought to disappear altogether within 5 million years, as famously predicted a few years ago by Jenny Graves at La Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia. But there's growing reason to believe that what's left of the Y is here to stay. For one thing, even though it has lost almost all of its original set of genes, it has gained others. We now know that 61 of the human Y's 78 genes were not present before the first inversion took place. Almost all the new genes play a role in sperm production, making the Y a perfect home for them. There are often several copies of these genes, too, so there are backups. An even stronger reason to think the Y chromosome has a bright future comes from the discovery, by Daniel Bellot at the Whitehead Institute in Boston, that its decay seems to have ground to a halt. His team compared the Y chromosomes of 8 mammals, human, chimp, rhesus macaque, marmoset, mouse, rat, bull, and opossum, to trace its evolutionary history. They found bursts of gene loss directly after inversions happen, followed by long periods of stability. In fact, not a single gene has been lost from the oldest part of the human Y in the past 44 million years. The remaining genes may simply be too essential to lose. A team led by Henrik Kessmann at the University of Lausanne, Switzerland, surveyed the Y chromosomes of 15 different mammal species and one bird. They found that a chromosome linked with maleness evolved 3 distinct times. Once in birds, once in the ancestor of the platypus and echidna, and a third time in the ancestor of all other mammals. The ancestors of the 3 Ys each started with different kinds of genes, but to Kessmann's surprise, all ended up with a stable set of the same sorts of genes, which is what Bellot's team also found. You play this evolutionary game with different sets of genes, and you get the same kinds of genes retained in each case, he says. It's always the regulatory genes that remain. Why? When a gene is lost from the Y, males are left with one copy of the gene on their single X chromosome. That means less of the protein the gene codes for gets made, roughly half the usual dosage. Evolution can fix this in males by ramping up production from a single X, but then their female descendants get a double dose from their 2XS. To keep gene output the same in the two sexes despite this difference, females have evolved to inactivate one of their 2 copies of most genes on the X. Perhaps the amount of protein produced by the regulatory genes retained on the Y had to be so precisely calibrated that organisms couldn't survive the awkward intermediate stage when this workaround did not yet function perfectly, suggests James Turner at the MRC National Institute for Medical Research in London. Regulatory genes are particularly vital because they control many other genes. So important are the Y genes, in fact, that even during a man's lifetime, losing the Y in some tissues takes a toll. Chromosomes can be lost when cells divide, and men who lose the Y chromosome in their bone marrow, which happens in about 8% of elderly men, have a higher risk of cancer and die an average of 5.5 years younger than other men. And finally, at the end of the article, we can find the references.
This is the end of the article. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share to other students, and subscribe to our channel for more valuable study tips and strategies, and of course, for more biology. If you are looking for notes, study guides, or potential questions in association with this article, you will be happy to know that by visiting www.tes.com, you will be able to find any resource you wish for. We have our own online shop, hosted on the TES website. Our shop is your one-stop destination for educational excellence. So, what are you waiting for? Visit our online shop today and explore the resources available. Thank you so much for tuning in, and best of luck with your studies and exams.